I believed in the house we chose together, the way Tyler held my hand when we walked through it the first time and said, "This is the one, Maya. This is ours." I believed in Sunday mornings and his coffee going cold because he always forgot it was there. I believed in our arguments about small things, whose turn it was to call the plumber, whether we needed 2 streaming subscriptions or 3. I believed in the ordinary, unremarkable machinery of a marriage. I was so certain I knew the man I had built a life with. I want you to hold on to that feeling for a moment, the feeling of being certain. Because what I'm about to tell you is the story of how mine was taken apart, piece by piece, on the night of our 7th wedding anniversary. Tyler and I met at a conference in Atlanta. He was the kind of man who filled a room without trying. Broad shoulders, easy laugh, the sort of confidence that doesn't announce itself but simply exists. He was charming in a way that felt effortless, and I was 31 years old, and had spent enough time being careful that something in me decided for once to just let someone in. We dated for a year. He proposed on a Tuesday, which I always thought was funny. No grand gesture, just the two of us on the couch after dinner, and he looked at me with something so quiet and serious in his eyes and said, "I don't want to spend another day not being married to you." I said yes before he even finished the sentence. We were married 6 months later. A small ceremony, mostly my family and a handful of his. His mother Barbara sat in the front row in a cream blazer and smiled the way people smile in photographs, wide enough to satisfy, never quite reaching the eyes. I noticed it then. I told myself it was nerves or grief. She'd lost Tyler's father some years before. I gave her every excuse I could find, the way you do when you want a family to work. For 7 years, I gave everyone in that marriage every excuse I could find. Tyler was a sales director for a tech firm. That's what he told me. That's what the business cards said. The ones he kept in a little leather holder on the desk in our home office. His work took him away 3 weeks out of every month. Sometimes more. The travel was relentless. Chicago, Denver, Seattle, Portland. Different cities, different clients. Always a reason to be somewhere that wasn't home. I worked from home as a graphic designer. I had my routines, my clients, my own life that didn't collapse when he left. I was not a woman who needed to be watched over. But I noticed things. That's always been both my gift and my particular kind of suffering. I notice things, file them away, and then I work very hard to explain them to myself so I can move forward without disruption. The second email address, for instance. I saw it once on his laptop screen. Just a flash. A different name in the corner before the tab closed. He said it was a work alias. I filed it away. The phone that was always face down, always on silent, always within arm's reach, even in the shower. He said it was habit from his years in sales. I filed that away too. The way Barbara went slightly rigid whenever I mentioned visiting Tyler at his office. The fact that in 7 years I never once visited Tyler at his office. He always had a reason, a conference, renovations, a difficult week. I filed every single one of those away, and I kept going. I was so committed to trusting him that I had trained myself to being curious. And I think, looking back, that he knew that about me. I think it's one of the reasons he chose me. Our 7th anniversary fell on a Thursday. I spent the morning at the farmer's market, buying ingredients for the dinner I planned to cook. His favorites, nothing elaborate, just the food he always said made him feel at home. I cleaned the house. I lit candles. I wore the green dress he always said he loved. I was, in every possible way, ready. He was supposed to be home by 7. By 8, the food was going cold. By 8:30, I had texted him twice. By 9, my phone buzzed with a single message, caught up with a client. "So sorry, baby. Can we do tomorrow?" A question mark. 7 years, and I got a question mark. I sat at that table for a long time. The candles burned down. I wasn't crying. I was doing something quieter than crying. I was recalibrating, telling myself it was work, telling myself these things happen, telling myself that tomorrow would be fine, that the dinner could be reheated, that the dress would still fit. Then I went to put on something comfortable, and because I didn't want to sit alone with my thoughts, I opened Tyler's laptop to watch something. Anything. He hadn't logged out of his email. I wasn't looking for anything. I want to be clear about that. I was not a woman who went through her husband's things. That had never been who I was. But the subject line was right there, at the top of the inbox, and it stopped me the way a sound stops you in a dark house. Happy anniversary, my love. Reservation confirmed. The Lakeview Inn. The sender's name was Claire. The sign-off at the bottom of the email was 3 words. Your wife. Claire. I read it once. Then I read it again. Then I sat back in the chair and I looked at the ceiling and I breathed, very slowly, in and out, the way you do when your body understands something before your mind is ready to accept it. Your wife. Not your girlfriend. Not your other woman. Wife. I took a screenshot. Then I searched the Lakeview Inn. I found the address. 40 minutes away. I could have called him. I could have texted him the screenshot with a single question mark of my own. I could have sat in that chair and let the truth come to me on its own terms. But something shifted in me in that moment. Something cold and very clear moved through all the noise, and I picked up my keys. I parked across the street from the Lakeview Inn, and I watched my husband have our anniversary dinner with another woman. She was white, close to my age, with dark hair pulled back from her face. She was laughing at something he said. He was leaning toward her the way he leaned toward me when he wanted me to know he was paying attention. He was using the same hands, the same gestures, the same exact version of himself that I had believed belonged to me. I watched him pour her wine. I watched him reach across the table and cover her hand with his. I watched her look at him the way I used to look at him, back when I still felt like I was enough. When they left the restaurant, I followed them. Not close. I stayed back. Just headlights in the dark. They didn't go to a hotel. They drove to a neighborhood 20 minutes away, and they pulled into the driveway of a house. A house with children's bicycles leaning against the garage. A garden along the front walk. A light on in an upstairs window. A home. I parked across the street and I cut my headlights and I sat there. And I watched the lights come on inside. I watched shadows move through the rooms. And then the front door opened briefly. Just briefly. And I saw him lift a child. Small, maybe 5 years old. Dark-haired like her mother. She wrapped her arms around his neck and he held her. And I saw his face in the porch light. And he was smiling the way I had never once seen him smile. Like something that had no performance in it at all. I sat in that car for 2 hours. The lights went out one by one. The neighborhood went quiet. And I sat there in the dark with my hands in my lap, and I felt something I don't have a clean word for. It wasn't rage, though rage was in there. It wasn't grief, though that was there too. It was more like recognition. The sound of every small thing I had ever filed away finally clicking into place. I drove home. I did not sleep. When Tyler came home the next morning, he had flowers. He had that easy, self-correcting guilt that men like him are very good at deploying. The soft apology, the flowers, the way he pulled me into a hug and said the client dinner had run completely off the rails, and he was so sorry. He'd make it up to me. We'd do something special this weekend. He said it all in one breath, rehearsed without sounding rehearsed. I had always admired, in a distant way, how smoothly he moved through the world. I accepted the flowers. I smiled. I said it was okay. And then I spent the next 3 days dismantling his life from the inside out. I found the second phone in his gym bag, tucked inside a rolled pair of socks, a prepaid, dozens of messages from Claire. Ordinary, domestic, loving. Can you pick up milk on the way home? The kids miss you. I miss you. I found a folder in his home office, buried under a stack of old tax documents that contained a marriage certificate. His and Claire's, dated 2 years before he married me. 2 years before me. That meant the marriage I believed I was in. The one with the ceremony, the rings, the name I had considered taking, was not legally a marriage at all. It was a ceremony, a performance. I was not his wife. I was a woman he had convinced to play a role while his actual wife waited for him across town. I found joint bank accounts, a mortgage in both their names, life insurance policies that named Claire as the primary beneficiary, and I found something else: transfers. Regular, recurring transfers from the joint account Tyler and I shared into an account I didn't recognize. Month after month. For years. He had been quietly moving my money into his other household. I called a lawyer that afternoon. And then I looked up Claire. I knocked on her door on a Saturday morning. Her friend Jessica was there. I could see 2 coffee cups through the sidelight window. Claire answered in jeans and a gray sweater, and she looked at me the way anyone looks at a stranger at their door. Polite, slightly cautious, waiting to understand what I needed. I told her my name. I told her I was married to her husband. I watched her face move through every stage, the confusion, the brief, offended almost laugh, and then the slow, terrible settling, the way certainty crumbles. She had felt things, I could tell. Small things, the same kinds of things I had filed away. His absences, the phone always face down, the vague explanations. She had filed them too, in her own way, for her own reasons, because that is what women do when they love someone and the alternative is too large to look at directly. We sat at her kitchen table. Jessica stood in the doorway with her hand over her mouth, and I laid out everything I had: the photos, the documents, the timeline, the bank transfers, the marriage certificate that predated mine by 2 years. Claire was shaking. Not crying at first, just shaking, the way a structure shakes before it falls. She got up and came back with her own folder, her own documents, her children's birth certificates, with Tyler's name on them, her mortgage agreement, 7 years of a life she had believed in as completely as I had believed in mine. We filled in each other's blanks at that table. Every piece of information she gave me was another thing I finally understood. Every piece of information I gave her, I watched land on her like something physical. We didn't hug. We barely knew each other. But by the time we heard the front door open, by the time Tyler walked into that kitchen and stopped in the doorway and saw the 2 of us sitting there, we knew each other better than he had ever allowed either of us to know him. He stood there. I watched him run through his options in real time. I could almost see it. The way a man like him cycles through exits. And then he simply ran out of exits, because there were none. And for the first time in what must have been the entirety of his adult life, Tyler had absolutely nothing to say. Claire told him to get out of her house. I was already gone. What followed is the part people always want to hear, and I understand that. There is something deeply human about wanting to know that the punishment fit the weight of the lie. Bigamy is a crime. Tyler was charged. The forged documents he used to marry me, a falsified declaration of single status, added fraud to the list. The bank transfers were flagged as financial abuse. Officer Reeves, who handled the investigation, was thorough and unhurried, the way good investigators are. Tyler had been careful, but he had not been careful enough for 2 women who were no longer protecting him. He was fired before the charges were even formally filed. His employer did not wait. Barbara, his mother, the woman who had sat across from me at Christmas dinner for 6 years and looked me in the eye and said nothing, was quietly, completely cut out of Claire's life and mine. I heard later that Tyler didn't speak to her either, not after everything became public. Some betrayals are too total even for the people who helped construct them. He was photographed leaving a motel off a highway exit, alone, carrying a duffel bag, squinting in the parking lot light. Someone sent me the photo. I looked at it for a long time, and then I set my phone face down on the table, just like he used to, and I went to make myself some tea. The house we shared sold quickly. I took my half. The real half. The legal half. The half my lawyer made sure was accounted for down to the last cent. I left with more than I arrived with, not because the money was the point, but because I refused to leave having lost anything more to him than I already had. People ask me if I'm okay. I tell them I'm better than okay. I'm clear. And I've learned there is a meaningful difference between those two things. Okay implies that you've recovered, that you've been restored to some prior state. But I don't want to be restored to who I was before. That woman was perceptive and intelligent and loving, and she trained herself to look away from things she should have looked at directly. I don't want her back. I want the woman I became in the parking lot of the Lakeview Inn, sitting in the dark with steady hands and absolute clarity about what she was seeing.